like to reflect with you today on Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary, that tomorrow may not be lost. 60th anniversary celebration, that tomorrow may not be lost. Sisters and brothers, we celebrate today the 60th anniversary of our independence from colonial rule. Though most of us are overwhelmed by a sense of shame, a sense of regret, a sense of embarrassment and betrayal, we nevertheless thank God that we are alive to bemoan our plight. We owe our continuous existence to God's mercy and compassion. We believe that it is by virtue of God's mysterious love that we have been spared the trauma of another civil war and the sordid experience of sister countries of Somalia and Bosnia and Burundi and Rwanda and Liberia and Sierra Leone. Since we are alive, we shall continue to nurture our dream and keep up our hope that soon, very soon, we shall overcome. Since we are alive, we shall continue to hope that soon, very soon, our land shall be transformed. Though we may be brought low in the sight of the world, though many young Nigerians are begging to become slaves in European countries, though many of our people are living lives not only below poverty line, eking a living that is shameful in the 21st century, to say the least, we nevertheless thank God that we are alive. Though we are lacking in pride in ourselves and pride in our country, and we are living daily with a sense of humiliation, we still thank God that we are alive. Now, beyond thanking God for keeping us alive in some fragile unity, we really have little to celebrate. The government has announced 365 days of celebration. For me, it should be 365 days of soul searching, 365 days of reflection on the way forward, that tomorrow may not be lost. For after 60 years of independence, while the rest of the world is competing in digital revolution, digital technology, and flying high at jet speed in business and economics, our own country is standing still, weighed down by the vestiges of a profligate past and a confused or clueless present. At 60 years of independence, Nigerians are filled with regret and nostalgia about broken promises, about dashed hopes, and about shallow dreams of a land of peace and prosperity. For many, the story of Nigeria is that of paradise lost. The embarrassing truth we must acknowledge today is that many of those who constitute Nigerians' elite, political, economic, and social elite, have over the last 60 years been largely blind guides, unprincipled leaders, and greedy opportunists, scavengers as it were. Many of our successive leaders have turned out to be reckless plunderers and mindless looters. Our leaders have often exploited the poverty and ignorance of the vast majority of Nigerians and cashed in on the existing ethnic and religious polarities when it paid them to do so. Yes, indeed, we must acknowledge the fact that the collective suffering and pain which we experience in Nigeria today is not God's will for us. It is not God's will that people should be living in the sprawling slums all over our cities today. or the dirty villages or the impassable roads that we have. It is not God's will. But it is the consequence of the actions and inactions of Nigerians, especially of the elite class. We are so richly endowed by God that we could indeed not only become the giant of Africa, but the envy of the world. Today, however, we seem to be paying dearly for our undisciplined and unprincipled lives. We are indeed a highly blessed and fortunate people. All we need to conquer, therefore, is not nature, but ourselves. We are a highly blessed and fortunate people. What we need to conquer today is not nature, it is ourselves. In the course of the last 60 years, we as leaders and as parents became more enterprising in greed and in political mischief. As we failed to inspire the young people in the pursuit of higher values, we lost control of our younger generation. Many of our graduates from secondary schools and universities and polytechnics became social deviants, drug addicts, secret cultists, constituting a nuisance in our homes, in our schools, and in our offices, constituting themselves into a nuisance on the highways and the alleys. With juvenile bravado, many of these young people have visited their vengeance on the adult society that has failed to give them a sense of direction. So they have gone about cheating and stealing and raping and robbing and killing and maiming. They have often committed these crimes with the sophistication of the Italian mafioso. Thus, the collective psyche of our young people has been so seriously wounded and their delicate conscience so brutally battered by the crimes of the adult society that we now stand the chance of losing tomorrow altogether. Our fear is heightened by the number of battered young people daily paraded on TV by the Nigerian military or the Nigerian police as suspected armed robbers, suspected insurgents, terrorist insurgents, suspected secret cultists, or suspected hired assassins. It is amazing how many Nigerians have chosen to address the rising crime rate among our youths in the country without taking into cognizance the acrimonious economic and social circumstances that produced such. My own reflection is that we are about to lose millions of our young people whose teeth are on edge, as it were, because their fathers and mothers have eaten sour grapes. We are about to lose millions of young people who are constipated because their mothers have eaten the forbidden fruit. Our young people are full of energy and are endowed with numerous talents, but they lack the necessary pride in their fatherland. Our youths are resourceful and ingenious, but they are devoid of any sense of direction. Our children have not been adequately taught. Only last Sunday we discussed what the core national values of this country are and how have we taught these core national values. Our children have not been adequately taught, nor have they seen practical examples of justice, of truth, of love, of compassion, of patriotism and altruism, enough as to motivate them. What is more, our young people seem to have lost hope. And this is the greatest danger when people lose hope. It is the absence of hope in the midst of hardship that has led many of these young people, unemployed people, into the now widespread township thuggery, armed robbery, drug peddling, drug addiction, and even terrorist insurgency. When we see our young people becoming beastly in hate, ruthless in violence, and reckless in destruction, we do not need soothsayers to tell us what went wrong. We do not need to ask many questions. Nigerians have engaged in a life of debauchery. Like the prodigal son in the parable of Jesus in Luke chapter 15, we have left our palace of pride to dwell in the pit of shame. We have often thrown decency and integrity to the dogs and flushed justice and truth into the septic tank. We have often violated love and trampled on the poor and the weak. We have enthroned bribery and corruption in our public life, and with reckless abandon, we have perpetuated that art of thievery called settlement, or the Nigerian factor. We have neglected our educational institutions criminally and made our teachers an object of ridicule and scorn in the eyes of society. Our schools and colleges, in turn, have lost their sacred character as formation centers and have rather become breeding grounds for thieves and thugs and secret cultists and gangsters and rapists and prostitutes. We hear these days of school children beating up their teachers, sacking their principals, and burning up their libraries. Examination malpractice in our schools has now assumed the frightening dimension whereby teachers and principals organize cheating at external examinations, and parents annually contribute money, quote unquote, to settle supervisors and invigilators. The progressive degeneration of our national landscape in the last 60 years has some important lesson for all men and women of reason, namely, that greed is a cancer that eats its own host to death. Can we say that together? Greed is a cancer that eats its own host to death. 2, that lies, corruption, and political subterfuge have never and will never nurture a people. Again, that lies, corruption, and political subterfuge have never and will never nurture a people. 3, that thievery, thuggery, and roguery, by whatever name else it is called, when it becomes king in a land, that land rots. And 4, that when hooliganism and banditry get into high places, the superstructure soon comes crashing down. Yes, that when hooliganism and banditry get into high places, the superstructure soon come crashing down. And finally, where lawlessness becomes the norm and illegality becomes conventional, the people soon perish. Can we say that together? Where lawlessness becomes the norm and illegality becomes the convention, the people soon perish. Those who seek to become or to bestow hope on the coming generation must commit themselves to a life of truth, justice, and righteousness. When our young people see the hypocrisy of the adult society, they convince themselves that there is no truth or justice in the world. They make up their minds that there is no such thing as love and compassion. They conclude that the world is one big jungle, largely inspired by the principle of mutual exploitation and often governed by the law of the survival of the fittest and the triumph of the valiant. There is work for the adult society, my dear friends, if we must bestow hope for our young people. If tomorrow is not to be lost, there is work to do. There is work to be done by all of us who belong to the adult society in Nigeria if we are not to kill tomorrow before today's sun sets. We must own up before our young people that we have betrayed our fatherland and failed to lay the necessary foundation for a prosperous future. We must own up to the fact that we have often stolen food off the hands of our own children. Each one of us is guilty to the extent that we have contributed in some way to the mess of the moment by our corrupt and selfish lifestyle. As parents, as teachers, as preachers and pastors and elders, we have often failed to inspire our young people to a life of righteousness. As leaders and elders, we have often failed to be a beacon of light. Instead, we have often been a source of scandal for our children and the children of our country. The time has come, my dear friends, for repentance. For us who are believers in God, the situation may be very bad, but the situation is not hopeless. We should believe that redemption is possible for our land by the power of God who creates and recreates. We can experience rejuvenation if today we begin to retrace our steps and get back to the basics. We should believe that from the rubble of our shattered motherland, a rich, powerful, peaceful, and united country can emerge by the power of God who puts back flesh on dry bones. This will happen if we identify and get rid of the demons that have bewitched this land since independence. In the past, we have seen too many leaders and elders that are habitual violators of truth. Liars. Leaders and elders in this country have over and over again sacrificed truth on the altar of greed and the lust for power. However, those who seek to bestow hope on the coming generation must commit themselves to a life of truth, to a life of justice and righteousness. Parents must be ready to make sacrifices for the sake of their children. Teachers must recognize that they teach more by their lives than by their lessons. The world has too many teachers and preachers. What the world needs today are living witnesses to love, living witnesses to compassion, living witnesses to truth and justice. Yes, we talk too much about truth. We talk too much about justice and fairness. What young people need instead is to see this truth, this honesty, this fairness at work in the civil service. They need to see this truth, this justice, this fairness in the award and execution of contracts, in the process of governance, and in the examination hall. They are constantly let down, our young people, constantly disappointed when their leaders are fraudulent and when they see teachers assisting unscrupulous students to cheat at examinations. They are shocked when they discover that their governors, their ministers, their parents, or their pastors are liars. Then they wonder whether a life of truth is possible in this world at all. Their trust is violated when they themselves or their peers are sexually violated, sexually exploited, harassed, and abused by leaders and elders and preachers and teachers. We must reject the foolish pattern of life which has led our nation to the mess of the moment. Instead, we must seek after higher values that will guarantee peace and prosperity. We must start cultivating the virtues of sacrificial love, the virtues of justice, of discipline, and patriotism. When I asked what the core national values of our nation was, what would they were, and many of us couldn't say for sure. I say we must start cultivating the virtues of sacrificial love, the virtues of love and justice and truth and discipline and patriotism. These alone can bring peace and prosperity. If today we cultivate these virtues, then we would have laid the foundation for a more wholesome future for our country. The upcoming generation, the youths themselves, must shun materialism and vainglory. What I see around today, what appears to attract our young people, are not the kind of values I have enlisted, are not sacrificial love and truth and justice and discipline and patriotism, what I see that our young people are enthralled about is materialism and sensual pleasure and vainglory. Our young people must shun materialism, for materialism blinds people and enslaves them. Instead of seeking escape in the plastic wings of sensual pleasure and hard drugs and the vanity and vainglory offered by the popular celebrities in our society, our young people must see the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. They must see that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and seek this fear of the Lord. If today our young people allow their lives to be shaped along the way of these higher values, then tomorrow will not be lost. Yes, if today our young people allow their lives to be shaped by the love of the love of sacrifice, of truth, of justice, of discipline and patriotism, then I say tomorrow may not be lost. If today our young people choose the culture of life in place of the prevailing culture of crime, violence, and death, then they shall have a bright future ahead of them. Yes, if our young people embrace the culture of life and truth, they shall one day sing the national anthem with a sense of respect for our heroes past, a sense of pride in our fatherland, and a sense of belonging to a nation bound in freedom, peace, and unity. Lasting peace in any society is the reward of a consistent life of truth and justice. True peace is achieved by a people who know and live by the fact that righteousness exalts a nation and that greed and avarice destroy a people. Democracy in its highest expression is the mutual acknowledgement of certain fundamental truths, including the truth of the dignity, equality, and freedom of all in a particular society. In Nigeria, democracy will only germinate and thrive upon the mutual recognition and acceptance of the truth that all the inhabitants of the geographical entity we call Nigeria must enjoy equal dignity and opportunities. All children of Nigeria must enjoy equal opportunities. And how can you have a situation where from birth, millions of our young people have already lost out? From the time they are born, they have no opportunity, no equal opportunity of elementary education. Such a society can never have peace. It is not possible. Let us look at the nations that are making progress, like Finland, Sweden. All primary schools are the same. There is no difference between one primary school and another. All schools are the same. You ask them, why don't you? They said, every school is the same. The standard is the same. The government ensures that every child goes to any school, it is exactly the same. We have a system that already condemns the overwhelming majority of our children to decrepit, dehumanizing life from the day they are born. Such a society will never know peace. And it is not a cause. It just means we need some serious restructuring. The restructuring we need is not just geographical restructuring. The restructuring we need is not who governs where. The restructuring we need socio-economic restructuring within the same geopolitical zone. We need socio-economic restructuring within the same town, within the same city, within the same family. For democracy to thrive in our land, all who qualify to be called Nigerians by birth or naturalization must enjoy equal protection of the law, irrespective of ethnic origin, religious affiliation, social status, or political preference. For a peaceful and prosperous future, right-thinking Nigerians have work to do. I say we have a lot of work to do. Those endowed with vision in Nigeria must resist the temptation to apathy and despondency. We must rise up and be counted on the side of reason, on the side of truth and justice. We must refrain from joining the bandwagon in a life of greed and graft. We must reject the foolish pattern of life which has led our nation to the mess of the moment. Instead, we must seek after, yes, the higher values that I say will guarantee peace and prosperity. We must start now to cultivate these virtues. If today we cultivate these virtues, then I say we would have laid a solid foundation for a better future. Yes, we must begin now. Begin from where we are. It is not enough to identify the problems, because most Nigerians know the problems. It is not enough to identify the problems. We must do something about these problems. We cannot sit idly and complain endlessly about the deplorable state of affairs. It is better to light a candle than to cause the darkness. Right-thinking Nigerians, both young and old, must all be committed to the all-important task of national rejuvenation. Yes, we must light the candle of hope in our homes. We must light the candle of hope in our offices. We must light the candle of hope in our schools. We must light the candle of hope in our churches. We must do this by struggling to lead a life of truth, justice, sacrificial love, honesty, and discipline. We must embrace a new ethic of life and pursue it relentlessly. For indeed, as Proverbs chapter 29 says, where there is no vision, the people do perish. May the good Lord, who has given us this wonderful land, this rich land, who has given us this rich, diverse people, hundreds of diverse ethnic groups with all their own social, historical resources and riches to contribute to make a great nation. May the Lord, who has given us all this, may he grant us the grace to do what we must so that tomorrow may not be lost. May we, whose children are growing up in this society, who do not desire that our children go begging at the doorstep of other nations to become slaves in their countries, may we do what we must so that tomorrow may not be lost. May our leaders, some of who led us to the present mess, may they experience true conversion. May they recognize, all the elite, economic and political, come to recognize our individual contributions to the mess of the moment, and may we begin to pull back and do what we must so that tomorrow may not be lost. May God in his goodness renew our land, transform our land, forgive us our many sins, and grant us a new Nigeria. 60 years have been wasted, as it were. May the next 10 years not be wasted. May we be alive to celebrate 70 and tell new stories. 10 years is enough to turn our country around. We have very ingenious, resourceful people. 10 years is more than enough to turn this country around so that others may begin to ask, how did they do it? May we be gathered at 70 to celebrate a new Nigeria with a new kind of leaders, a new crop of leaders, with a new crop of youth, of energetic, resourceful, intelligent youth who are ready to see this country to new heights for the betterment of the children of God in this part of the world. Amen.